Speaking of medieval beasties, there are the gargoyles that were carved from stone or from clay, and they were most commonly found on cathedrals and English castles. They came into Gothic architecture in the 1200s and were used first and foremost as a water spout. They would project from an upper part of a building or a roof gutter to throw water clear of the walls or foundations. Due to this function, they would always have their mouth wide open. So if a creature is not serving as an open-mouthed water spout, it's actually otherwise known as a grotesque. So a grotesque is used solely as decoration. The gargoyle's secondary function was to guard against evil.
So we're going to draw a watercolor pencil gargoyle. You're going to need watercolor paper. You can use cardstock as well. Watercolor pencils, that's super important. 2 sizes of paintbrushes, like a skinnier one and a medium-sized one, a cup of water, and an eraser, because we're going to be erasing a lot of it. What's so neat about this technique is that we take the paintbrush, add some water to that watercolor pencils, and they go on like pencils, but once you add water, they turn into a beautiful, beautiful watercolor. I'm going to start off with a 2B. That's your, and I'm using aquarelle, which is, again, a watercolor pencil. So what's super important is that you take your reference photo and you need to plan it out now before you even start. What's your focus? Where and how are you going to place your subject in the paper? And as you're drawing, I'm going to teach you about plumb lines and level lines, but you're going to need to check and recheck those. So as you go throughout this lesson, be sure to remember the lines and plumb lines. Alright, so I'm going to use straight line approximation, which is where I approximate every curve by using just straight lines to so I'm not adding a bunch of curves in order to get this done. Okay, so what I used to get my approximation was about where I think the edge of the eye is, the front corner of the eye, down to the edge of the mouth. And I used triangulation, where I used a triangle to kind of get more of an accurate feel. And what I'm doing is I'm outlining each of the interior objects. At first try, I'm not sure that these are the correct angles. So again, I compare them with these straight lines. Do you see how I'm taking that paintbrush and comparing it? And I'm going down and comparing it some more. And I'm trying to get the angles of the jaw line and the angles of the neck, and trying to get them to all go by comparing it to other places on the face. So to get to where that height is at the top of the mouth, it's actually right there. Right there, kind of underneath the bag of the gargoyle. So I'm gonna hit it right about there, and then I'm able to go down, because earlier, my first comparison with the plumb and level lines, I was able to figure that out, that it was right underneath his brow line is where the edge of his mouth is. Looks like that ear is very near and comparable to that other side of that wing. And here's the higher wing. It's just above the ear line of our gargoyle, of our dragon. Use your level as a guide, Again, so I'm using a paintbrush as my level, but I'm also eyeing some things. And I'm comparing it to get the further back designs as well. And as I'm outlining things, I'm also planning, well, I'm not going to fill those in just yet because I'm going to eventually fill those in at the end. It's almost like a coloring page I'm filling out right now. All those lines I'm making, I will erase, but they are great reference lines. I want to get a little more detail in here, and I want to look and start filling in all those dark areas right there. So I'm going to fill in, so what you do is you want to squint at it, at your reference picture. And start filling in all the dark areas. Think of it almost like it's black and white, in the sense of try to get the darkest areas first. Then we're going to go in, well, we're going to kind of fill it in all about the same darknesses with a little bit of value. Oh, see, here I am using the, gotta get this one line in here. Okay. I found that my approximation just wasn't just right, so I used the plumb and the level lines to figure that out. Okay, so start filling everything in. And you're not going to worry too much about value right now. Yes, some. But right now I want you to get some darker areas. And when you squint, notice where those main chunks are. And that's what we're going to fill in. This project took me about an hour. So be patient with yourself.
Gargoyles came about as a French legend that came up around the name of Saint Romanus. He relates how he delivered the country around Rouen from a monster called a gargoyle or a goji. It's said to have been very similar to a dragon. There's multiple stories to versions of this story, but one of them is he captured the creature with help of a volunteer, a condemned man, and the monster is led back to Rouen and burned, but its head and neck would not burn due to being tempered by its own fire breath. The head was then mounted on the walls of the newly built church to scare off evil spirits and used for protection. And that is the story of how gargoyles came to pass.
If you notice, this gargoyle does not have very many light spots, so expect to have your gargoyle to be mainly dark, and that's okay because he's a darker stone. So most of them's gonna be gray or black. Now I want you to go grab a darker pencil. In this case I got a 6B, and go dark. Don't be scared, go dark. It really brings it out. So while it's nice and light, it's a nice picture, but you add that darkness and it adds so much depth. It won't ruin it. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm doing the squinting and also noticing the darkest areas. Right here is something called a core shadow. It's a great highlight. So as you look closely on the collarbone of this dragon and his muscles there, they do have a faint light reflected off of it. And so leaving that where it's just light gray gives it this highlight that gives it a spectacular feel. Okay, this is the fun and kind of scary part. Grab your medium-sized brush and go ahead and make it wet, but not too wet, and start adding it to those darkest areas. Now it may feel scary, but you're already committed, so keep going. And you're just adding water. So in order to create a good focal point, oftentimes you'll want to have super detail in one area and have the rest of the area fade away. That's a really common practice in paintings, but not so noticeable. But something you notice it a lot in is photographs. In photographs, you'll see that there's often a lens that takes away the focus from everything in the background and makes it blurry. But the focus of the usually person or the item, it makes it less blurry, or it makes it blurry. No, it focuses on that one person and really highlights them. In this case, that's kind of what we're doing with this gargoyle, is we are adding, I'm going to go to the skinnier brush here so I can have a little more control. Again, I'm just using water. So all this detail you're seeing is just simply from water. But since these are smaller areas, I want to be sure to fill them in well. So about it not I'm smoothing it out. There's some areas that When you first add the water, it's a sharp area and with a sharp edge, and I want some areas to be nice and blended. So I just add the water over that area and it softens up the area. So see right here, there's that jawbone, where it's pretty dark, but I'm going to add water to it and make it nice and dark. Oh, I'm so glad I was able to get that really nice and dark. It's okay to add a few extra things with your pencil. Do know that when you add it, you may find that you may have added too much because if the pencil is touching the water, it turns too super dark already. But you can still add to it and then add water over it. I want to really clean up this area and highlight it. So like I said, I'm going to leave the rest of with the wings and the body, I'm going to leave that less detail and more focus on the face because that's where I chose my focus. Today you learned about levels and plumb lines, you learned about straight line approximation, you learned that the more checks you do with your levels and plumb lines, the more accurate your drawing will be. And thank you for joining me in my studio. I'd love to see what you make and what other creations that you make with this technique. I love the watercolor pencils.